Love is our true divine nature, and our heart serves as the intersection of the spiritual and physical, connecting our soul with our body as the conduit for anchoring our divinity onto the earth plane. Embodying our divinity is the key to our ascension and to manifesting our highest destiny in this life. The teachings of the heart are alchemy. Join spiritual mentor and channel Jennifer Spohr each week on a sacred journey to lift the veil to remembering your divinity and meet other beautiful souls who are living the path of the awakened heart. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. I am giddy and thrilled and overjoyed and all the things happy to welcome this guest today, MaryBeth Hyland. She is a best-selling author, coach, and speaker on how to create a thriving life and business through values-driven boundaries. She works with high-achieving executives and entrepreneurs to say yes to what lights them up and no to what burns them out, which is right up our alley. So, welcome, Mary Beth.
Oh my gosh, it is such, I feel all of those feelings that you described earlier too. It's such a gift to be with you. Thank you
I
for having me.
know, I feel the same way. And we are in the same state right now. We're both in
Yes.
Idaho. We're just kind of on opposite ends of the state. So, we're sort of close.
Yes, it's so nice to be in the state with you.
Yes, I feel the same. So, it's a love fest. I would love for you to share with us. So before we hit record, for those who are listening, Mary Beth and I were touching on a couple of really key topics that we wanted to share with you all today. And the first being in that Mary Beth, she specializes in values based everything. But so many of us have been experiencing rapid identity shifts this year. I really would love, Mary Beth, for you to share with us, the importance of what it means to revisit our values and how they might change, and then how can we navigate those changes, right? And when we're making those changes, understanding how they impact like all the different areas of our life.
Yeah, I love starting with this because this is a question I get a lot when people are doing one-on-one or going deeper into their values. And it's really along the lines of usually like, are your values the same your whole life or do they change over time?
Mhm.
It's such an interesting question because I think most people think it's like, oh, these are my values, period.
Mhm.
Versus I am a constantly changing, evolving human being, and therefore my values will also be constantly evolving and changing. Now, having said that, there are some that will likely be a through line for your entire life. For example, for me, unity with nature has been something that has driven me and made me feel grounded and connected for all of my memories of being in nature. There was never a time that I like
Yeah.
detested that or and it was a big shift. However, I mean, speaking of this podcast, if you would have asked me even just 7 or so years ago, if you asked me about spirituality, I would have said it didn't resonate with me,
Mhm.
which is the total opposite of who I am today. I'm like extremely energized and committed to having a spiritual life. And that's a huge part of my sense of well being and having aliveness and alignment. But it was because of a big life experience that created that shift.
Mhm.
And so we all have that in our own journeys. And so if you are going through rapid changes in your life, it's a really powerful opportunity to revisit your values, to get clear on what is the through line, what's consistent and still energizing you, and what maybe has shifted. Because what I have found is that when you're beginning on a spiritual journey in particular, right, in your own evolution, what you may or may not realize in the beginning is that most of the time, people have been operating based on the values in which they received approval and love for, not necessarily the values that are authentically theirs and they
Yeah.
get that intrinsic approval and love for, right? From inside of themselves versus the external validation of like, you are good, you are worthy because you went along with what I believe it makes you good and worthy,
Mhm.
right? And so it's a really powerful thing when you start to understand what parts of this have always been mine, authentically me, and what parts of my values have been domesticated into me, programmed into me because I thought that's what I should do or I should look like to be successful versus does it authentically give me energy? And that's actually one of the most powerful ways that you can tell whether or not it is a core value of yours or it's changing is, are you feeling energized when that is activated, or are you feeling drained? Right? Because the reality is, the majority of us aren't drained because we're doing too much. It's we're drained because we're doing too little of what activates our values. And so
Yes.
when, yeah,
I don't
right?
want to just say preach, sister, because, that's the thing is that God's will, divine will for our life here, for our path here, is synonymous with what brings us joy. They're one and the
Yeah.
same.
It's and it kind of feels counterintuitive, I think, to the way that most people were raised of like you need to work really hard. There's a hustle and grind. You need to earn everything. It's like a big something that you have to really push yourself to get to that place, right? And
Yeah.
not to say that you don't evolve and grow in your values, you absolutely do. That's one of the greatest gifts of them. But the difference is that when you're evolving and growing, you're the one who's feeling that intrinsic energy of like, ooh, here I'm going to the next level. I'm so excited about that versus your boss or your parent or your partner saying like, "Oh, I'm so proud of you for getting there." And you're like, "Oh, that's great because now they think I'm worthy and they love me."
Yeah, I would, from what you said, I would love to highlight a couple of points to put emphasis around. And the first is that, when I would say I've had lots of like up levels and catalyzing changes at this point, but to say when I was still working in corporate and was experiencing that initial, I would say, tremendous awakening where I wanted to change my whole life, it was exactly what you said. I embarked on this journey of rediscovery because I realized that my values, or what I thought they were, right, weren't necessarily all my own. Like they weren't reflective of who I really was. So I had to embark on this journey of really figuring out, in many ways, for the first time in my life, like who I was. And then the other
Yeah.
point I want to make around that is that this is not just a conversation for beginners per se, right? On
Right.
their spiritual path or on their path of growth, because we're constantly evolving and learning and growing. So questioning, not even so much like questioning, but just being curious always about how we're changing and how our values might be changing. For myself, I've been consciously focused on my ascension journey for like 15 years, and I'm constantly doing that. I'm always changing and I'm always revisiting, like what are my values?
Yeah, it's something that I literally redo. We have a free quiz that you can take and you get a values profile so you can see what are your core values, your aspirational values, or values that don't resonate with you, and then just values that describe you. And so I don't look at the one from the year before, but I retake it and then I can compare profile to profile once a year. And it creates this really, because I'm not looking to see like, was it this or that? Like I look afterwards to see what had
Yeah.
shifted. And it's so powerful because also when I began my values journey and my own consciousness and evolution into healing, more with like that is the highest measure of success, right? When I shifted into that, it was really fascinating because I used to think that I had like 30 core values. Like I really believed that they were all equally as important and they all mattered. And I'm not saying that's not true for some people, but I also think it's an opportunity to be able to revisit and say, okay, now that I see all of these, which ones actually are the ones that give me the most energy, that are the most energizing. And maybe actually some of these are families of values. And
Mhm.
this is the leader of that family, right? Versus like it's every single one of these things, because that can feel really overwhelming too. When you're like, well, I'm driven by, and you have a laundry list. That when you're going through a lot of changes, it's harder to feel that that's your anchor, right? Or to feel
Yeah.
like that's your compass and your guardrails. And so I find that for me, in each season of my own evolution, I love revisiting my values, and I love to be able to say, okay, what are the 1 to 3 values that are the most important in guiding me and keeping me grounded in this season? And that, I think, can be really challenging for some people who feel like, well, they have to be consistently the same. That's actually one of the most rewarding things when I start working with entrepreneurs, and particularly solopreneurs, because they're so used to coming from corporate spaces where it's like the values have been the same for 50 years or whatever. And I'm like,
Right.
guess what? You get to decide that. There is nobody who gets to judge you except for you when it comes to what you're going to do around this. And this is an invitation for you to, instead of judging the change, embracing and being excited and rewarded by having this deeper
Yeah.
awareness and being able to honor the truth versus think it's supposed to look a certain way in order to be right.
Yeah, absolutely. Which this could be a whole other podcast episode in of itself to say that, we're in so many ways in like that 3D conformist type of society structure, right? We're taught that change is like a bad thing, and that's literally the opposite of how of who we are as creator beings, right? Like we are literally wired for change and to embrace change is to evolve, and that's also where we find our joy as well. I believe one of the most direct paths to joy is through our creative expression, and that in of itself implies constant change.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think also being able to shift to a place where it's like exciting,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And it's like this, you get to meet this version of you now. What a gift to be able to go in deeper and to see what has remained constant and has continued to fuel you, and what has
Yeah.
shifted, that you can celebrate that evolution
I think you
without
touched
judgment.
I think you touched on this earlier when you were talking about your own core value of unity with nature. I do believe there are, in my own journey and that of working with other clients, I do believe that there are a couple of core values that we continue to, carry along with us on our journey. Like one of yours is unity in nature. Mine is connectedness, and spirituality. Like I think probably anyone who may have only met me once or maybe doesn't even know me, but follows me would come to that conclusion, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I feel like each of us has, some of those core values that stay constant.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So speaking of change and evolution and exciting life experiences, I'd love for you to share with us um, your journey with horses, because animal wisdom and love is just such a blessed, tremendous part of our experience here.
Yeah, it's so true. So since I'm speaking to you now from a legacy ranch, that was my great uncle's ranch, that I'm very fortunate that is being a part of what I get to experience in this lifetime of taking over guardianship of this land. And that's where I was first introduced to horses. My uncle had horses here. He was a cowboy. I was living in Washington, D.C. as a little girl in the city. So when I came out here, it was the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I had no exposure to most animals, let alone horses. And it's really cool to be able to actually look back at pictures and see how I was so connected to them, like immediately as a young person, and now have it coming back full circle. So long story short, I went to like horse camp, and did lessons and things as a little girl, but then I broke my tailbone and had the story in my head that I was not able to ride anymore because I just assumed that it would be too painful. Then fast forward 20 years from my last lesson, and I was here at this ranch on a solo retreat, and it's 100 acres on the top of a mountain, and it's all protected lands around us. So if you hear a voice, it's very startling.
Yeah.
You get the binoculars out and you look around, right, of what's going on. Am I safe? And I witnessed a cowgirl and her daughter and a couple of dogs move this herd of cows across our mountainside. And I just thought it was like something happened. I got the zing in my body of like, I don't know what that is, but I want to be a part of it. And that really was the beginning of getting me more in tune with what feels like my cowgirl roots, even though I'm not technically from here. It feels like from past lifetimes. And so I began to be exposed more into going into the mountains with horses, horses being a part of a team in a different kind of way than a lesson or a competition of some sort. And that very quickly turned into me going much deeper into my own practices and learning when I was in Baltimore and coming out here and having big experiences when I was in Idaho. And this past year, it really became this extreme shift in my life because I turned 40 and I decided that I was going to have a big experience. I've been depressed the last two birthdays. I cried myself awake and I cried myself to sleep. And I was like, gosh dang it, I'm not going to do that this year. I'm going to invest in myself in a big way. And I had actually was ready to go on this women's retreat to Bali and it got canceled. And I was so bummed out. And thankfully, I have a really quite a divine partner. And he said to me, something better is on the way. That's why this something is better is on the way. And within, I think, a few days, like 3 or 4 days, I got a text message from the woman who last year I ran a horse, a women's retreat with horses at Miraval in Tucson. And she texted me. So she's this incredible horse facilitator and equine specialist. And she said, look, if I could take off work and do this, I would. But I'd love to share it with you in case it speaks to you. And it was an invitation to work with two world-renowned trainers that work completely at liberty, meaning we're not using force and roping or anything like that that's aggressive. To be able to work with wild Mustangs and being the first humans that had interactions with them. And it was a month. It was a month-long experience in Montana, and I was something as soon as I saw it was like, this is it. I'm meant to do this. It was just like when I saw the cowgirl moving through my land here, I just felt this depth of like there's something about this. I had never trained a horse from starting before. I'd never worked with wild Mustangs before. There was not a deep-seated longing for this in my life. It was just something that came forward and my whole body knew that it was right. So that's what I got to do this summer. I invested a month. It was the first time I stepped away for that long as an entrepreneur and an adult with like responsibilities, right? So it was my first time really like fully stepping away in that way and just completely immersing myself to my delight and surprise, in addition to the technical training of working with wild horses. We also had a full-time person there that was an animal communicator. And so we had the opportunity to connect in that way if we were not feeling like we were getting the answers or understanding what was going on through more traditional techniques. And one of the trainers was also certified in the body code and the emotion code. And so we got to learn all of these incredible energy tools to be able to not only create a safe and grounded container within ourselves, but to understand how we were impacting our Mustangs and how we can support them in seeing what was going on with them through that energy work. So, long story short, I now have a Mustang. It was an incredible life-changing experience. I never thought I would be leaving with Norby, my Mustang. it was never my intention. I knew one day I would have horses, but certainly not in this first year of being out here in Idaho. And it's just then the heart knows. And it was one of those experiences. I felt this depth of knowing on a soul level, on a cellular level, that we were meant for each other. And in addition to that, there is a horse here where I am in Idaho that I'm dear friends with the owner, and she was going to euthanize him because he was unpredictable and almost kicked her son in the head and became very scary for her in managing his sensitivities. And I said, will you give me a chance? Can I try to work with him and see if any of these techniques that I've been learning with Mustangs will transfer? And he's now our other boy. So now we have two very sensitive boys that are doing beautifully. And really, all they needed was patience and more love and being able to surrender to not having a timeline and allowing each
Yeah.
of us to go on that journey together without any expectation other than putting one foot in
Yeah.
front of the other and seeing what happens.
Similar to what we need from each other, right?
Exactly. It's amazing when people, so Ollie, the horse who was going to be euthanized, he is like the smartest, most incredible. So I know how to teach horses how to do some tricks at Liberty. So like
Mhm.
backing up and going in spin and doing side pass and things like that. He does it so perfectly and with just loves it, is just asking to be a part
Mhm.
of that, to the point where people watch this and say, how could this horse ever have been considered to be euthanized? Like, how is that ever even a possibility? And the big piece for me was that like, there's so much of, I felt like I was going to be euthanized as a kid. I really felt like there was
Yeah.
something so wrong with me for being so sensitive and so much more sensitive than everybody around me and being the outsider in that way. And I was constantly being made fun of and put down and othered as a result of it. And so both him and Norby were labeled as overly sensitive and like they have issues. And so it was like my heart just was like, I know exactly what that's about. And what a
Yeah.
beautiful invitation to be able to be their guardian and to let them know that being sensitive is a superpower and that we're going to work with it and not try to beat it out of them.
They're soulmates. You're
Yeah.
soulmates.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. And it was the kind of thing where Ollie, when another horse had been introduced into where he was living, he actually kicked the horse and it was a whole thing and the horse went down. And so when we were going to introduce Norby, my Mustang, to him, there was this huge preparation and belief of understandable belief because there was evidence of it happening in the past of like, let's be prepared if he goes to attack Norby, if he goes to bite or kick, or we need to have the vet like make sure that if we need to get stitches that we are on that.
Yeah.
So I was allowing sort of other limiting beliefs to take over my thought process a bit, with also recognizing that that is something that did happen. But I'll tell you, Jennifer, when we introduced them to each other for the first time, in less than 5 minutes, they began mutual grooming, which is basically giving each other hair cuts and deep tissue massages in each other, to the point that like it was as if they had known each other their entire lives. And for the first 3 days, no matter where you were, what was going on, you look over and they'd be grooming each other, just completely entangled, physically entangled, with this
Mm.
depth of trust that it almost felt to me like it was these two sensitive boys finally finding somebody else like them and saying like, this is awesome. Like we can both be sensitive together and have each other and hold each other this way and groom each other in this way, in a way that probably it was like a lot to ask anybody else, any other horse, for, because of their volume of sensitivity.
It was a
So it was so
reunion.
beautiful. Yes, it truly feels like they have always been together, to
Yeah.
the point where where they live right at the bottom of our road here, There was multiple people there watching who have worked with horses that professionally their entire lives, and were just like, I've I've never seen this. This
Yeah.
is wild to see this level of trust and connection this quickly. It was also labeled as weird. People started saying this is so weird. And it was a great invitation for me to be able to just be like, what other people think is weird to me is like this divine connection that is so gorgeous and so obvious. But so quick to label the sensitive ones, so quick
That's what's
to,
real though. That's what's
yeah.
real though. And it really feels like, me, because I'm always getting downloads and information. It's like, just as you're sharing this, really feels like that experience that you had, that initial experience for that month, and what you're describing and how you're working with your horses now, that's the future,
Yes, it
right?
really feels that way. It really feels that
Us
way.
getting back to the truth of our divine connection and union with other living beings. And so much of what you're sharing about your experience with your beautiful horses can also be translated to our interactions with each other
Oh,
as
totally.
humans, right?
Totally. It's so true. We're so quick to label, right? We're so quick to say whether or not something's going to work out based on past information,
Yes,
right? Versus
totally.
faith in the present moment of what's possible, and knowing that things do change and evolve. And they've been such a gift in presencing for me how much of an opportunity we humans have when it comes to the speed in which we will cast something aside based on an artificial timeline of what things should look like.
Yeah, and your horses are also, the story that you shared is a great example of how they illuminate the way forward for us in terms of coming back to deeper intimacy and connection, not just with ourselves, but with each other, right? Because how many times, I'm sure you and I have experienced this, and probably everyone who's listening to this, it's like you immediately felt that soul connection with someone,
Oh,
but
instant.
you backed off, or you were
Yep.
like, oh, I can't feel this way about someone as soon as I see them. Like
Right.
that can't be possible. Like, how many missed opportunities have there been for us to connect deeper with each other because of our own fear-based conditioning?
What a enlightened curiosity. I was like, it's so true. It's interesting. Recently, I've had a few people that I don't have a personal history with say I love you at the end of a conversation. And there was
Mhm.
something that was just so refreshing about it. That was like, oh my gosh, I love you
Yeah.
too. And
Yes.
it wasn't like some awkward, like romantic
No.
thing. It was just a expression of what they felt. And it was so beautiful to be able to be with humans who I haven't talked to in depth, but yet we can communicate love in such a direct way that is often something that feels like you have to build up a certain level of intimacy and trust before you can even say I love you to somebody, versus the fact that like it's such a gift to be able to share that
Yeah,
love.
which is that fear-based conditioning, right?
Exactly.
And that's what we're here to do, as Mary Magdalene says, lift the veil of forgetfulness and to be embodied as who we are, as beings of love, in this human body, and expressing that toward and with each other and for ourselves. Like, that's the whole journey.
Yeah, it's so true. And
Yeah.
it's so easy to get caught up in thinking it's something else. It's just
Right.
so easy.
I
It's
know, but
so
we're really
easy.
cute too, and I've done it myself. Our human selves, we like to think that everything is complicated, right?
Yeah.
And
When
even
it's
love,
so simple.
yes, even love in of itself, if we have, wounds of unhealed trauma, we can even have a skewed perception of what love is.
Right. Right. Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
so true. And it's such a powerful invitation for each of us to reflect on, kind of like revisiting your values. Like, what an
Yes.
interesting thing to reflect on of like, where are you fully expressed in your love and where are you holding back from fear of judgment? It's like
Yeah.
really powerful thing to think about. My friend gave me this as a tool actually in the beginning of this year, in the new year, and she said I'm constantly asking myself, am I doing this to be loved or am I doing this to love myself? And I found it to be such an interesting way to look at love,
Mhm.
and to
Yeah.
look at the way that love is used for unconditional abundance and the way that it's used as like a tool for control and
Yeah.
how
Love
that
is
two are so
unconditional.
entangled.
The truth
Yeah.
of love, the divine truth of love is that it's unconditional, right?
Yeah. 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 But a lot of humans are still figuring that out.
Yes, again, because of there's a lot of very deeply embedded societal programming, ancestral conditioning, right? And on top of all of that, any current life experiences and many we're living in a time right now where there are many sensitive beings here, right? And if you're listening, and I know you are, Mary Beth, very sensitive, um, your journey is very purposeful in terms of finding the truth of who you are, feeling clear and fortified in that, and know also that you're here to share that wisdom too,
Yes.
with
Yes.
others.
Absolutely. I know there are so many people who can relate to that feeling of being othered because of the sensitivity, right?
Yeah.
Of thinking that something was wrong with them their whole lives because
Yes.
sensitivity wasn't there for the rest of whatever groups they were a part of, whatever dynamics and communities and families they were a part of. And it's such a huge thing to be able to take the power back and to say, like, this is actually the thing that makes me the most powerful. This is what I have as a gift to offer not only myself, but all of the world. And that has been one of the strongest messages since I stepped out on my own and started doing this work of being able to be a voice for other people to recognize that it's like the most right thing about you.
Absolutely. And all of the hardships that you've experienced, right? All the trauma and other adverse experiences that you've had that have felt so challenging and at times like can't overcome them. You're meant to share those experiences, to
Yeah.
share that wisdom with others, to show them, to illuminate the way for them and how to overcome that and truly shine in their light.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a gift to be on that journey and to be in such great company, right? With so many people who are doing the same. And I'm so rewarded by, like, it doesn't have to be your job, right? You don't have to be a coach. Just even vibrating from a healing energy is going to help to serve for
Yeah.
other people.
Well, our greatest purpose, I often talk a lot about purpose and mission in what I'm sharing because there is a difference. It's like all of our purpose, all of our highest purpose here, every one of us, it just might look different, but it is to be on our own journey of growth and coming back to the truth of who we are. That's the same, for all of us. How that looks might be different. And some people have a mission that is that beyond their personal ascension, right? They're being called to share their gifts and their wisdom in a way that is making a more global impact. And that's not for everybody, and that's perfectly fine. It's just all about finding what that truth is for you and
Yeah.
living embodied in it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. And it's such a beautiful thing that so many more people are aware and making that choice, I think, than ever before. It's really incredible to be a part of witnessing the shift and also being a part of the shift in my own journey and really being able to go from a place of total despair. I'm coming out of a 2 year really deep depression and lots of I mean, I mentioned I cried the last 2 years on my birthday, but it was beyond that. I had a lot of trauma, a lot of stuff coming up that kind of just felt like I was constantly getting knocked down. And it's really easy to lose faith in everything we just talked about when it feels like you're constantly getting punched in the face
Mm.
and you're not sure what it even, I mean, I know you and I even had exchanges during that time of like how intense it was and just feeling really ungrounded. And that's what's so powerful about choosing to be on the journey is that you know the wisdom will come, that it is all a part of the bigger picture, that it is a part of what is required to gain the healing that hasn't had the opening for yet.
Yeah.
And so that has been really the most rewarding of like where I am today. There's been such a huge shift where I didn't know if I was going to make it. I was really in a place of I had deep suicidal ideation. It was a journey of having a really uh making some really bad financial investments in coaches that were like tens of thousands of dollars that did not pay off. Really thinking I was trying to outsource my power to everybody else to teach me how to pivot my business model so I could work and live off the grid, aka what I'm doing now. Like I really thought somebody else had to tell me how to do it. And then, all these things went wrong with our house. And then we were in massive credit card debt. And then my sister sued us for $100 million. And there was all this family trauma around all of that. And it just got to a place of like, nothing's working, quote unquote, right? Feeling that kind of energy of just being so, 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 so stuck and so sad and so judging of myself for feeling like a total failure amongst all of those things, because that's just where I was in my journey at that time. But now being a place where I can talk about like these amazing horses and living my retirement dream 30 years early and all those kinds of stuff, like it didn't just happen because I woke up like this. It's been a
Right.
really deep, intentional healing journey that, surprise, surprise, as soon as I changed my measures of success to being fully in alignment with my values and activating them every day and really only looking at whether or not today was a success based on whether or not I took care of myself and my well-being, all of a sudden all of that stuff just shed and like went away and healed. I mean, all of a sudden, right? It was deep work. And it was
Yeah.
such a powerful thing to recognize that you can be in 2 years of despair. And if you really decide to go head on for the healing path as the path versus the victimhood and the judgment path that I chose for a while, that is when some incredible, incredible transformation happens. And that's when I was really able to alchemize what was that about, right? What were all those things teaching me? And I needed to feel them at that depth of pain to be able to not only heal things that I thought had been healed, but were deeper, but also be able to help more people and serve more people because I know what that feels like. And to be able to really sit on the floor next to people when they're at that spot of rock bottom and knowing that it really not only can get better, it absolutely will. And I am a huge advocate of doing that by aligning with your values and making that your source of feeling that success, feeling that love, feeling that purpose, and rejuvenating from the inside out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you touched on the shadow side, the darker side of your journey as well, because it is in those darker times where miracles are happening because when we can't see or feel like we're connected and to know how to move forward, it's because we're being called to be very present in the moment to our body, to where we're at, to how we're feeling, and to go deeper to the root of what's bringing that forward. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Mary Beth, you're such a shining example. I have to say, you're such a shining example of someone who is just all in on their path and willing to go deeper and to expand more and more. And so I just want to witness you and celebrate you in that. And I know that
Thank
it's
you.
inspiring so many people that are listening. And in closing, is there anything else that you're feeling guided to share?
Hmm. I would just close in encouraging anybody who has a tingle, a feeling, right? A glimmer of one day I want to fill in the blank. And then if you say, like, and that'll be when I'm retired, that's my goal when I'm retired, that was really like living out here in Idaho and having horses and doing the homesteading thing, which is really exciting, going to start next year. That was all like a retirement dream 30 years from now. Like that was very much like once I have done checked all the other boxes of life, then I will do that. And one of the things that I really unfortunately, but very much in a human way have experienced is that we are not promised tomorrow. And so to believe that we need to wait until we have done a certain amount of societal norm success check boxes before we can have the experiences and create the life that we truly want, that's the dream life. I would just encourage you to start asking, like, what could that look like today? Like, what could that look like today? Because before I got here to Idaho and am now living, part-time here and part-time in Baltimore, eventually will likely be here year round. But it was really like there was no, I had no idea what even the first step was. It was just, it sounds so far away. So I mentioned I sunk and may as well have burned a bunch of money trying to have people tell me how to do it because I thought for sure I couldn't figure it out on my own. And so I would just encourage you, if you're in a place of like you have a clear vision of what you want, or maybe even a fuzzy vision,
Mm-hmm.
but it's with horses or on the water or in the mountains or whatever, just give yourself that gift as much as you possibly can. I knew I wanted to be a homesteader, and so I started beekeeping in Baltimore and learning from people in a beekeeping society. And I knew I wanted to be a cowgirl out in the mountains in here, so I started to make more friends with horses, people who had horses that had extra horses that I could ride with them, right? And they could teach me. And I started training with a trainer. And, there's so many things that you can start doing now that will get you there in a way that feels like it's happening, just like the natural next step versus this huge jump. And so I would just encourage you to think about, if you're telling yourself that you need to wait until one day for something, what's the baby step that you can do now to start experience even a taste of it? Because that's going to get that to become a reality way faster than thinking, I'll
Yeah.
wait until I'm retired.
So much truth in that. And you did a fabulous job of articulating examples of how, right, based on your own path, how someone, can take those baby steps and what they look like. Lady, I could talk to you forever.
Ditto.
What an amazing conversation today. Such a blessing to have you. And thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and your amazing journey with us. You were a blessing and I love you.
I love you too.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Path of the Awakened Heart. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or pathoftheawakenedheart.com so you never miss an episode. To learn more about living with an awakened heart and navigating your ascension journey, visit me at jenniferspore.com.